Okay, so now we've got our chart, our line chart with a choice of which particular set of lines are. Now, the problem with, as you saw, with some of those charts is that the data, time series data, can be very noisy, especially as we saw for very low volumes. We know that already, right? It's hard to tell what's going on there. So in the next example, we can show a rolling average where the users decide. We'd like to show a rolling average because that smooths out the data. If you remember, rolling average just takes an average of the previous, n values, whatever that is, 1 week or 2 weeks or something like that. But we don't have to decide what rolling average the user might want to see. That we can let the user choose. Okay, so we're going to pass in a value into this get line plot called window size, which is where the user chooses how many days the rolling average is set to. If they set the window size to 7, that's a weekly rolling average, or they could set it to 14, which is a fortnight. Okay, so this line plot actually doesn't change very much. We just pass in this extra bit of information about what size plot, what size window they want, and then create a data frame that's based on the rolling average with that window size. Okay, so almost no changes there, but this is going to be much more powerful because we can allow the user to really look at noisy data and smooth it out. The controlling code also isn't that much more involved. There's a little bit more going on, but if you look at these codes independently on their own, they look like they're quite daunting. But if you see what we're doing, just making these little incremental changes, it's not actually that difficult. So what do we need to do? We need to create a slider. Okay, so this is another widget. So pn.widgets is the list of widgets that Panel provides, Panel being the dashboard software. We create an integer slider. The name is day average. The value is 7. So by default, it starts at 7, and it goes from 1 up to 21. So we're allowing the user to choose any range of values between 1 and 21, but starting at 7 initially. And so when we create the row of the column in the row, again, let's just run that because it's easier to see. When we create the column in the row, so there's my row, and on the left-hand side is a column, and the column has the title and the drop-down and the slider, and then the right-hand side, the right-hand column is just the chart. Okay, so we create this row with a column with the title, the drop-down, and the slider. And then when we get the line plot, we also want to pass in the average value from the slider. And so actually, we don't have to change very much here because all we want to do is just watch that slider. So when the user changes it, it gets updated, it updates the chart. And so in fact, we just put a watch on the slider and tell it again to call this update time row. So that update time row gets called, this function gets called every time something changes, whether the user changes the drop-down list or whether they change the slider. And so if we look at the resulting code, you can see as I increase the slider, the data should get smoother and smoother and smoother. I'm allowed to go up to 21. Okay. If I take it back down to 1, then there's no smoothing applied because a 1-day average is just the raw data. Okay, so and now I can go back to the very low data, show that, and now allow the user to smooth it out quite considerably. And now it's a bit clearer what's going on. Still not that clear, but you can, now you can highlight some of the variables that you're interested in. And for example, if I want to just look at n, I can see that n looks like that. So it does allow the user to get really deep into the details without having to provide a particular chart that they want. We allow them to interact with the charts. Okay, the other thing we can do, that's the resulting chart. And as I said, if if we set day average to 1, that's just the original raw data. If we set it to 14, that's rolling average of fortnightly rolling average. The other thing we can do is add a date slider, and that again doesn't involve many changes to the code. So again, if we want a date slider, then we're going to have to limit the data. So we, in this case, I'm always just filtering down to another data frame. So this code is producing lots of data frames. Actually, every time that something moves on the slider, I produce a whole series of data frames which are restricting the data down to what I need or what the user's asked for. So here I'm just restricting it to a particular set of dates, which is this date range thing that's passed in. And again, the code for the date range slide is very similar to before, except that now we just add it to the page and watch it. Let's just look at the code very quickly. So if I scroll down here, this time date range is just a date range slider, and I can set the initial value to be the entire series, and the start and the end to come from the original data. And then I just watch that, the code just watches that slider, and whenever it changes, it calls this update time row. So every time anything changes on the controls on the widgets, this function called update time row is called, and that then creates a new plot based on what the widgets are set to. So there's the high volume with a 7-day average between the dates 1st of January to the end. So the dates as set originally. If I go to very low, let's look at low, because we know there's something going on here. We can see already that this blue one, D, is 0 for most of the year, but we can zoom in perhaps to a particular month. Zoom into where it just starts. So that's the period June to August, and I can smooth the data out even more by changing the rolling average, or less by going back to the original data. Okay, so there's the resulting picture, something similar to what we just looked at, and that, as you can see, really allows the user to have very fine control over this set of line plots and what they want to see from those line plots. Right, let's finish that video, and then we'll move on to doing some other types of chart, so the heat maps and so on.